Welcome back to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In today's episode, I talk with Ana Hartman, a member of the first cohort of my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. Like so many people in academia, Ana has spent years jumping between adjunct and visiting faculty roles, struggling with the uncertainty of where she'll be working next semester, and craving a job that provides more stability while also giving her time to pursue her passions, including creative writing. Ana earned her master's degree in English and creative writing, and she's long wanted to continue her own writing projects, but has difficulty finding the time and mental energy to devote to this after pouring herself into her teaching. Our conversation is wide-ranging, covering our frustrations with academia, college budget cuts, and the rise of AI and its use in college writing courses. Ana also shares how she's been overcoming her anxiety about jumping into a new career, something I know that many of you out there are dealing with. Even though it's only been a few weeks since our cohort ended, Ana is already attracting private clients for her editing business. She committed early on to building her business, and it's paying off. If you've hesitated to go into editing because you don't have a doctoral degree, or if you've just been scared to take the leap, I hope this conversation helps give you the courage to go after your dreams. If you ever want to discuss your options for leaving academia and becoming an editor or writing coach, please contact me via email at paulina@acadiaediting.com. Here's my interview with Ana Hartman. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. Hi, Ana. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, and thanks for having me. Very excited.
It's great to see you. You were enrolled in our first cohort that we did this summer, and we've sort of been keeping in touch along the way. But it's great to see you in person again. So why don't we start off? You can tell us a little bit about your background. What do you do as an academic, and how did you get into editing?
Okay, I guess my path into academia was pretty blurry. I don't think I've ever, officially said yes, I want to be a professor. It just kind of happened that way. I guess when I was getting my master's degree, there was a practicum in teaching that you could teach classes at a community college and, get your degree at the same time. And I kind of just never really left that. Again, not really by choice. My master's degree is in English and creative writing. I followed the creative writing track, and so that's always been my kind of end goal and dream. And it's a really tough field, though, and I kind of feel like all of the time and effort you have to put into teaching when you're an adjunct, um, at least the way I went about it was to teach 7+ classes at 3 different schools, crossing state lines, let's make a full-time job out of these part-time jobs type thing. And that just really wore me down. There was no time for creative pursuits. Although I was teaching creative writing at some schools at some times, which I loved. It wasn't something that was in my regular schedule. Right? I was teaching, or I still am teaching, rhetoric, first year writing, argument, which I don't hate. Right? It's still writing, it's still learning. It's not that I loathed it. It's just that it's time consuming, and stressful, and I just, all the creative endeavors got pushed to the side.
So are those mainly like for for first year students or
Yes, most of my students are first year
okay, so it
writing
sounds
students.
like you're adjuncting at a few or you've been adjuncting at a few different places and kind of having to cobble together those intro level
Hmm.
classes and only rarely being able to teach the stuff that's really exciting and fun.
Yes, I did kind of find all the ways I could to make first year writing comp classes creative. That was my way of survival. Um, so so yeah, I'm not gonna say that it was completely hellish all of the time. I walk away with so many skills, um, but not what I set out to do, right? And for creative, I feel like that's pretty huge, right?
So when you're teaching those classes, do you find that you're doing a lot of editing of student papers or like how did that experience lead you maybe towards being interested in freelance editing?
Absolutely, that's what you're doing most of the time, right? Is commenting, grading, slash editing. That's what it is, right? And thanks to you for really pulling that out of us and showing the class, like you've been doing these skills for, especially as a writing teacher, right? Because a lot of the students in our cohort have all different backgrounds, but especially as a writing teacher, absolutely. And I find that myself as a writer, which um, this is deep. It's in my core. It takes me forever to write, but I still do it. But when I'm editing, sometimes I am really surprising myself with how quickly I'm typing and just rearranging this whole essay. And I'm kind of like, how does my brain do that? So that was a real relief in that this thing I really want to be, this writer, is so hard. But guess what? Editing for me, like I can take someone else's work and I really enjoy it. My brain likes that exercise of solving problems for them. So yeah, I really think it just kind of took seeing and I really can't remember how I first saw your advertisement, Paulina. I'm still trying to. But when I first saw academic editing, like, oh, what's that? That's not the same as just editing, right? And just looked through your materials and started getting very excited about it, saying like, well, I'm reading these articles all the time, teaching them to students, and also editing student work all the time and editing uh, colleagues' work all the time. So really, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I had no idea that copy editors existed until I was publishing my book. And it was with Routledge, and they had a freelance copy editor who contacted us, and it was just part of the process for everybody. And I think that's true for a lot of people, like especially of us who are good writers who've never found a need to hire an editor.
Mhm.
A lot of people just don't even realize that this is an option. So it's great that you heard about that and felt like it would be applicable. I think probably you saw me on Facebook somewhere, but
I think
um,
so, because I follow a lot of the professors are out posts.
so you enrolled in the first cohort and um, probably had some more time over the summer. And, as we transition into the fall, what were some of the steps that you were taking to move that editing work forward, applying to jobs or you're creating your website and those sorts of things? And how have you been able to fit that in with the teaching that you picked up again in the fall?
As I am teaching online asynchronous courses, and it just makes it a lot easier for me to treat it like a freelance job. I think I said that in one of the cohorts, like, yes, I have to go back to school, but I'm going to just treat this as a well-paying freelance editing job, not a completely horribly paying teaching job. Um, so yeah, what if I just kind of treat all of these papers as editing jobs? It's hard to explain the shifts in the mind that you have to make in being an editor versus being a professor. Um, but they're not big leaps, right? They're subtle.
Yeah, I think one of the in your cohort, one of the big challenges, I think, for a lot of people was the identity shift and
Hmm.
the changing from I'm a professor who has to say yes to everything that comes to me, all the work, the extra work, into I'm a business owner who will say yes to all the work, but only if I'm getting compensated fairly for
Hmm.
it. That's something that I've noticed with a lot of people is that finding ways to stand up for yourself. Like I remember somebody else was starting to get some editing projects from an agency, and, they said, oh, we're going to pay you for X number of words, but really the document had like an extra 500 words or something. And we talked about how it's important to stick up for yourself and say,
Hmm.
no, I want to be paid for the work that I'm doing. And so I do think, yeah, when you've been spending a long time, especially as an adjunct, being asked to do a lot for very
Hmm.
little, it
Hmm.
is a bit of a shift into becoming a business owner and, saying this is what I offer and this is what I charge and, not feeling any guilt around that.
Yes. I didn't mention this when you first asked the question, but I did cut, I think, three whole assignments for the students, which I'm sure they're happy, but it turns out I didn't need them anyway, right? Just kind of making more time for myself, putting my business first, really. And I don't want to sound like I'm putting the students second because I'm not. But just case in point, the job that I just accepted with your help, with your encouragement, actually. Just I guess for listeners, I have a dissertation to edit, which with a week turnaround, and Paulina and I was going to turn it down, but Paulina said, no, you can do this. And I sat and thought and said, yeah, I mean, these students can wait. They're gonna wait. And again, I don't mean in any way that's going to harm their progress as writers. But yeah, it feels good to do that.
Well, and I think so many of us, and I know that I did this when I was teaching, I felt like I had to pour all of myself into my
Yes.
teaching, because we're told that teaching is this virtuous activity, and it is. It absolutely is. It's probably the most important thing
Hmm.
out there, right? Education
Yep.
is so crucial, but that's also a way that our capitalist institutions take advantage of us, right? That like, oh, you're supposed to give all of yourself to this institution and to your students who need you.
Hmm.
And so we do more. We constantly rework assignments. We spend all our time grading and giving feedback. And the hours that I spent writing lectures and, over and over again at each semester trying to make it better, and you get told at the
Hmm.
end of the year, sorry, there's no money for a cola, like, or,
Hmm.
no, we're not getting raises this year. And I remember I left in 2019. And so it was before COVID, and I was starting to build my editing business. And I'm watching in all these Facebook groups people talking about how they're told, oh, you have to immediately put your course online, like overnight. You have to move all your classes online. Okay,
Hmm.
fine, that makes sense. We'll do that. And then when COVID was over, supposedly, people were being forced back into the classrooms, even if they were immunocompromised or if they had family members who were, and students weren't being required to mask. I
Hmm.
remember watching this at University of Florida where I got my PhD, and it was horrifying to me. Like it
Yeah.
confirmed what I already knew, that we're just a number as faculty, and the students and the money are all the schools care about. But you have to move everything online, and oh, sorry if you're sick or you have a sick kid or whatever, you have to come to class and you have to teach, and no, we're not going to have students mask. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't ever doubt that any faculty care about their job or their students. I think we care too
Hmm.
much. So, good for you for pulling back and starting, still, doing your job fairly and doing what you're supposed to do, but, sort of drawing a line and saying, I'm not going to give everything to this job that doesn't give enough back to me.
Absolutely. Everything you just said. Yeah, you just reminded me of myself in the classroom at COVID. I mean, the school I was at the time didn't want to shut the dorms down, and that's why. It was just, yeah. And then that's another talking point is putting everything online. That didn't get much airtime at all to, at the time. It was just like, do that. Okay. And, of course we did. I'm not going to complain about that because, people in the medical field were also overdoing them, running themselves with zero energy. But if you think about that for a second, right, what you just asked us to do is use a whole different skill set. You're paying me like a kindergartner, right? It just doesn't, the math doesn't math there.
And people are, I think, are finally starting to see more and more that there's this expectation that we do so much for the institution, and yet, we're not getting anything back. And I've heard these stories about colleges closing, and there was one news story where this professor was at a baseball game with his wife, and he found out that he wasn't going to have a job in the fall because his wife got a text from her friend. Like the school didn't even notify the
Hmm.
faculty, but
Hmm.
they announced it, in the news before they even told the faculty. And so this guy found out while he was at a baseball game. But
It's
let's shift gears a little bit. We can complain about academia all day, but
hmm
the beautiful thing about starting the new life as an editor, I think, is having that refreshing new perspective on what it means to work, right? You're no longer
yes.
working for other people, for your institution, for your students. You're working for yourself. And
Hmm.
anytime you want to shift things around, say go from editing to maybe start a coaching component or something like that, you can do that, and go in that direction. And go back if you decide you don't like it. So, tell us a little bit about your business and how did you figure out what kind of editing you wanted to do, and how is all of that taking shape for you?
That was certainly a process, but I'm so happy to be in that process. I really think, and just for the people listening, I guess I'll say that Paulina's class is very organized and that she sets it up where you first do a resume. You kind of change the language in your academic resume to suit the editing field, which is not hard at all, right? It's just one or two words here and there, every other sentence. And you're not lying. Skills are all the same. But I also had to write a bio for, sorry, a biography for my, just what I do and my skill set and all that. And I was so terrified of it. Um, I think because maybe I felt a little different from other members in our cohort in that I didn't have a focus. Like again, I went for creative writing and I teaching rhetoric and argument and all this, which again is all fine. But I felt like there was a big blur there. And so moving into it, I kind of said, I have all this experience working with international students, with non-native English speakers, with writing for career paths, with writing creative hybrid classes. Like, how do I get all of this into one uh, category? And it took a while, but I got it. And in doing that exercise and writing that one paragraph, my whole trajectory for my business kind of started to come into my vision. It's not completely there yet, still, right? It is a process, but I'm definitely seeing how I can merge these two fields, scholarly writing and creative writing. Um, I can certainly, and I feel like I express this in my materials, like I can certainly handle just creative writing or just academic writing, but I can also put them together. And that's really kind of where I see this going, kind of a new territory for me and maybe for the academic world. If that doesn't sound too uh, um,
Too ambitious?
ambitious, yes, that's the word.
No, I say go for it,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that the act of like sitting down to write the bio helped you almost, it sounds like almost like a journaling activity or something, like where
It
you
was.
just trying to force yourself to think through those questions of who am I?
Hmm.
What skills do I have? What do I want this business to look like? And sitting down and drafting something simple that we think would be simple, like just a bio, for your
Hmm.
website, actually was a really helpful exercise in clarifying for you what you want the business to look like, at least for right now.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, so I think going in the direction of editing, scholarly research papers is great, but it's also cool to see that you are, dipping into that experience with creative writing, which, as you said, you really enjoy it and find it refreshing and energizing. So do you think you want to work with graduate students who are doing creative writing programs, or do you think you want to work more with somebody who's writing a novel or poetry or something like that?
I think ideally I would love to work with established writers, but I'm not expecting that to happen overnight. Um, yeah, I'm really confident in this area, and that's kind of the reason too that I really want to make sure that I don't leave that creative aspect out. And I guess also from what I said previously about it kind of got lost in all the other stuff, and I guess I don't want to make that mistake again. And because I also ultimately want to get back to my own writing, and I do feel like this path will lead me there, way easier than working in as an academic will. Um,
Yeah, because, when you're freelancing, you get to choose when you work. And if you decide that, in the middle of summer, you want to take a month off and go do your own writing retreat, you could
hmm
do that, right? You just block that off on your calendar. And if people contact you, you tell them, sorry, I'm not available until July or whenever you're coming back. But yeah, I think there's a Facebook group called Women Writers, Editors, and Agents, something like that. And
hmm
I mean, there's got to be like 70,000 people in this group. And I'm in it and I comment a lot. I don't get a lot of work from it because it's not really academic people.
hmm
It's more of these people who are many of them first time authors, trying to navigate the publishing process. But that's a great way, I think, to try to connect with folks if you're interested in that area. And I'm sure there are like a million other authors groups on Facebook too.
Yes.
Um, but just like kind of making yourself present there and, commenting and giving feedback, or sometimes people will openly ask for an editor.
hmm
And I've found, these first time authors are amateurs and they don't want to spend or they don't have much money to spend. And so that
Yes.
can be a challenge because I don't think you should give your services away for free. Um, and I often comment in there that like you get what you pay for, like no editor who's good at what they do is going to just
hmm
charge nothing.
Yes.
Um, but it can be a way to connect with people in in a Facebook group like that, sharing your website and that sort of thing. Um, and I think it can be rewarding too, like once you get established and you have a solid base of clients that are paying you well, you can also offer, either pro bono or heavily discounted rates to people who are just starting out. So yeah, so I would highly recommend going into those groups and just kind of, I mean, sitting on
Yeah.
Facebook isn't the most exciting way to spend your days, but when
Well,
you're getting
no.
started. Yeah.
But it's things like this that you do in your course, is you just say, look, it's right here, right? It's just this, just click on this tab and there you go. You have a place to start to try to bring in some clients or even just talk about it. So yeah, you're kind of full of those little tips, which are all great. Yeah, and then just also, I feel like just reading people's writing, that's not my assignment, right? That I've read 80 some drafts of from students is in itself refreshing, right? There's a big difference between that's another thing of being an adjunct or visiting professor for so long is that I feel like same thing, as much as I try to change it up, same thing every semester, same, which I don't like that. I need change. I need things to be different and feel like I'm progressing somewhere.
Yeah, I'm curious what you've seen in the last couple years with AI, because people are
Uh,
always asking me, are you see, I would imagine those intro like writing courses that would be probably the worst place that it's happening.
Absolutely, Paulina. And I wasn't even gonna. bring this up because it's a whole thing, but that is one of the catalysts um, that got me really to say, you cannot do this anymore. And I don't mean that I'm so against AI or anything like that. Like I know we need to change with the times, this and that, but academia doesn't, it's very slow. We can see that happening right now. Yes, I had 4 online courses last semester, which I thought, I was teaching in person and online, and then I was like, okay, well, another thing is that a school where I actually really enjoyed teaching had budget cuts, and I was cut there. So I said, okay, well, let me see if I can get 4 online classes. That's almost 90 students, right, without faces. They were all using it, all using AI. And oh my gosh, like I think one of the first questions I asked you in the cohort was like, what if someone turns in an editing thing that's written by AI? But it was because my brain was so like, I mean, it causes me brain damage. I can't, every paper took me 20 minutes plus. And I know I had people trying to give me advice, like a friend of mine who is also uh, she's a full timer, but she kind of just said, like, look, don't put time into it. They didn't put time into it. But then I would sit there with it and be like, how can I not put time into this? The leadership there is, again, I'm aware of the all of the issues that surround this new technology, but there needs to be some kind of oversight. I was literally in a meeting and they spoke to student use of AI. I think they might have paid more attention to the professors using it than they did the students, first of all. And then they said something like, AI is hard to detect. It's this, it's that. Don't pretend it's not there, but not telling us what to do about it. Do you realize, though, that this is plagiarism, which is in every syllabus, is the uh, top tier rule in academia? Like, we might go and say that it's a little different than plagiarism, which it is, but all those nuances, sit down and hire someone full time who is a tech AI person to update these policies. Like, what is going on? To me, that was just it was a breaking point. And I'm happy you asked that question because I feel like nobody wants to talk about it either.
Well, and the administration response sounds tip that you described sounds typical to me, that they're worried about the
Yeah.
faculty, but like the students are going to get off the hook. But I don't think I've seen it in academic research, but and maybe even like in PhD level courses or something, you get students that are using it because they're just so pressed for time and they don't
Hmm.
really care about the course, or it's like required or whatever. They just want to get it over with. I'm hoping that we don't see it creeping into research, but I've heard from some others that there's some like medical research is actually a lot of those
Mm.
researchers are using AI to write, which is sad.
I have a friend who's in a PhD program. I was telling her about my new career shift, and she said I would run those things through an AI checker because I told her she's in a group project and 2 of her classmates used it. And I asked because I said, are you telling me to do this because the university will before the dissertation is approved or not? And she said, yeah. So that's another topic we can talk about another time. I might just put it in my contract, like not responsible for any AI written material. Um, but it is something that's coming up, I guess. And yeah, nobody is. I couldn't believe that it was a PhD students, but I can believe it. I can and I can at the same time. Um, I guess the biggest point about AI and freshmen is that, I mean, anytime, if you can think back to when you were teaching and you had to maybe call a student out for plagiarism, like your emotional state before that, I never wanted to do it. And I know that I also am an extra sensitive person. I feel like I'm going to feel this student's turmoil too, and I do. But it always was an issue. Like I would spend a lot of my time worrying about it, but now it's every student, right? When I first was getting these papers, when I had the 4 classes, I was calling students to the table and saying, I can't put a grade on this until we meet. They would meet and be super aggressive on Zoom in my living room. Uh, and that's just not okay with me, right? Because of the sheer number of them. Um,
Yeah, I mean, plagiarism was a huge deal for me when I was teaching because it seemed like I always had, we use Turnitin, right? And it
Hmm.
gives you, it shows you that these two paragraphs are copied and pasted, and here's the source. And I would go and I would manually compare, and sure enough, word for word, two whole paragraphs in a student's paper is copied from this other book or whatever. And I'd bring the student in, and like without fail, every single one of them would look me in the eye and say, I don't know how that got there,
Hmm.
or oh, I didn't copy that. And
Yeah.
that I'm an emotional person too, but I would get angry. Like it
Me
would make
too.
me angry that they were not that they did it, but that they were lying to me about it. Like and thinking that I was, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, do you think I'm stupid? Like
Mhm.
how can you sit there and say you don't know? Like ah
Yeah.
my head
Yeah.
would explode, and it was
Yeah.
just got to be, and it happened it's at every school I ever taught at, every course I've ever taught, every age group. It was infuriating,
Hmm.
and it's too bad because I can't imagine having to deal with AI now. That would drive me nuts.
Thank you so much for saying that because that's me to a T. And I figured it out with one of my friends. Like, why am I so mad? Like, it's hurting them, not me. But it was hurting me because, I already don't get paid enough. And now I'm spending way too much time on these papers. Uh, but I got to the root of it, and it was that I really do hate being lied to. So I'm so
Yeah,
glad that, and then everybody who I would ask advice for was kind of like, just like, oh, it's hurting them, not you, but not giving me the tools I needed to.
yeah. I remember one of my mentors saying, "Oh, why do you get so mad about it? Just fail them or whatever your policy is." And I think like maybe that's a common thread with people like us who, quote unquote fail in academia, right? Or like we can't
Hmm.
hack it, or like
Yeah.
whatever this stereotype is that like we decide we can't stay anymore. And I've noticed that I think with a lot of people in our cohorts is like we just care so much. We're emotional
Yeah.
people. We care. We pour ourselves into our work. We give everything we have to the students, and when you get one of those rare students who actually cares and likes you and wants to be there and do the reading, it feels so fulfilling and so rewarding. And you would do anything for them to help them succeed. But then
Hmm.
there's just so many others that are the opposite, that don't care, that lie, that are disrespectful or worse. And it's like
Hmm.
it's like we can't not take it personally, and
Yeah.
maybe that's a personality flaw. I don't know.
No,
I
it's
like
not.
being emotional and empathic, but empathic.
Yeah, you're good.
Um, but I think maybe that's there's something to that where people like us who care, who are emotional, who are passionate, like that's why we can't stay. But at the same time, I feel like that passion is what has helped me in my business, and like
Hmm.
I will work at a problem until until it is solved. And I won't stop, and like if there's a question, I have to answer it and I will pour everything into it. But in my business, there's a return, like
Hmm.
I get appreciation from the clients that I'm working with who thank me and who treat me decently. And I get appreciation from you all who are students in the cohort, who enjoy
Yeah.
being there and who are just like nice people to talk to. And so I think it can be scary to leave that, quote unquote security of academia, and although with you adjuncting, it's a lot less secure.
Hmm.
But like that familiarity, it can be scary to leave that and set off into business, but yet I feel like the payoff is so much better.
Definitely. And I'm starting to see glimpses of that as well, which is so fabulous. Um, yeah, totally. So much that you said there is just I'm in complete agreement with.
So
I guess,
what are some of the steps you've been taking as you're starting to attract clients? What are some of the things you've been doing and what do you think has been working for you?
well, I've just started, I guess just a few days ago, put my website up on social media platforms
Was that
to attract.
scary?
Yeah, yes, it was very scary. I started with Facebook just because it's the the least amount of um, I guess of the audience that's there, they're the least amount of business academic types. So I thought, let me put it here first. But yeah, it was really scary. And then I did Instagram and then finally LinkedIn, which it feels really great. I definitely have the ambition to continue working on my site and just making it what I, keep envisioning it to be. So far, that's kind of it. I'm going to do, as you said, the Facebook groups, the women editors and things like that, and I have followed them. I just haven't been commenting yet.
You got on some of the dissertation lists, didn't you?
Oh yes, that was very early on, which yeah, that was so great. And that was one of the first momentum builders for me, I feel like. So one of the first steps Paulina gives us is to get your resume together and then send out to universities, writing centers to get on dissertation editing lists. And I feel like I sent out about five and got three responses that they added me to the list right away. And that was a great kind of like, okay, it works, right? And then I just heard from a student who I'll be helping write her, or sorry, edit her dissertation. So that is definitely a good move. Um, and I'll be going back to that too to try to get my name on more boards for that.
And the electronic
ABC.
thesis and dissertation list, because then you exist out there, right? Like,
Hmm.
and for years, and so like I did this years ago, but I still get inquiries every semester from many grad students who need an editor, and they typically don't end up working for me because they have a lower budget, and I
Hmm.
charge more now because I can with the amount of faculty who who hire me. Thankfully,
That's
I'm
awesome.
grateful. But yeah, so it's that little step that you take that takes maybe a day to send out those emails, and then
Hmm.
you're there, forever basically until they shut down their websites, I guess. Um, so you're always
Yes.
out there for people to find you. Yeah.
And I'll also say I did the math, even though I'm new editor rate and grad student rate, it's still way more money than we would make editing I don't know, how many papers do I edit a semester? Probably 1,000 or more. So yeah, the payoff is already well worth it. Uh,
That's a great point that I never thought of before is like you're spending time developing the course, teaching the course, putting all the materials together, answering emails, grading
mhm.
or editing papers, and your rate, I'm sure if you added it all up, your hourly rate would come up to be very low,
Yes,
as an adjunct especially, but also even like tenure track.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so with editing, you can, yes, you do have to email and answer questions and, communicate with clients or whatever, but and that's not technically paid, but even still, I think if you add it all together, your hourly rate would come up to be much better
Yes.
than adjuncting, yeah.
No doubt about it. So
So
it's
when this client contacted you, right, she said that she found you on the ETD list, and
mhm.
so how did you go about negotiating that project, right?
This might just have come from being in your class and hearing how other people managed it. I didn't, and this is huge for me, I didn't have a lot of anxiety or stress over those communications, which every other element of these things I tend to just from my, just because of my high strung personality. That's how I usually react. But no, very, kind of just very natural. This is my second inquiry. I did have a creative writer also contact me, and I ended up just kind of having a conversation with her, and she wasn't quite ready to use my services yet, which is fine. But I said I've been a member of this writing group for years, um, and they're great. And she emailed me back thanking me for that because she found a kind of a place there. And I think that all of those things that I already have a knowledge base on. That's the thing. I already have this knowledge base. I'm just communicating like a person. I'm not worried about them complaining to me. It's complaining to the dean or and it's great. It's really great. Just to even just say, hey, I see you're almost finished your dissertation. What a labor. Congratulations. It seems that that's well received on the other end. Um,
No, that's great. So I think you said to me you planted that seed
Hmm.
by getting on those ETD lists a few months ago when we first started the cohort.
Yes.
And it's starting now to pay off. So I think that's a
Hmm.
great lesson for people is that something that maybe take a day, to email these lists and try to get on them. You might not get contacted, the next day,
Right.
but months down the road, people, when somebody needs you, when they have a project and they want to hire you, you're going to hear from them. And then weeks later, you're going to hear from somebody else, and so you plant that
Yeah.
seed and then it just keeps growing and growing and they refer you to somebody else and it's a snowball to mix my metaphors. um,
Fantastic.
and
Yeah.
gets bigger and bigger. So it's great to see that you're already starting to benefit from that.
When I first saw that task, right, on your on Paulina's course, my first thought was, oh, I can't do that. Why? Right? And
The
that in
ETD
itself,
list.
yeah. Why do I think that way? And that's how, and I'm sure there's a group of people out there that can relate to this. It just doing it and overcoming those small things have built up so much confidence for me as an editor. It just pointing out the how irrational that is, right? Why can't you email someone to get on an EDT board? Like I felt like that was beyond my skills or something. But just to add, Paulina also gives you an email that's written and ready, right? So like a template. It's just not even a paragraph, right? That says I have these skills I can edit for graduate students. Here's my contact info. Um, but that's kind of been my experience with this new career is that I'm seeing how base level afraid I am, but also I'm seeing how I can overcome it, and it's there's no words um, to say how great that is.
Well, I think, I don't know if it's like the marketing thing or just the idea of business or whatever, because like I know growing up, I definitely had this idea that business was like, or entrepreneurship was like this very massive, complicated thing,
Hmm.
And yeah, if you're trying to open a restaurant and you need to like get certified by the health department and buy all these things, like you need a business loan and a location and you need to employ people and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a huge deal. But I think a lot of people associate freelancing and entrepreneurship with like it's a whole thing.
Hmm.
And then you get into it and it really isn't that complicated, right? It really is just sending a two-sentence email
Yeah.
to some administrative assistant at a university saying, "Hey, can I get added to your list of editors?" And but for some reason we build it up in our heads to think it's complicated and it's really not, it's
Yeah.
just taking those little steps one after another. Um, and moving forward, right? And I've noticed even with people who have been editing for a long time, they're struggling to find clients. And I'm thinking it's not that hard, you just have to
Hmm.
put yourself out there. And I've told people like you just have to be everywhere, on Facebook, on Instagram, and not even posting all the time, just commenting, just hanging out for a bit and trying to be helpful. And I do think it's as simple as that, just keeping at it. So it's great to hear that you've been having some success with that. So
Yeah, and I just have to keep reminding myself, like, hey, remember when you were too scared to do that? Like, now you have a website, you know? So it's pretty incredible. Also, I just want to add this to maybe people who might be thinking of transitioning into editing, academics. When I was first up against kind of, I've wanted to leave, I wanted to get out of academia for a while, but again, it was that 4 classes online AI semester that really had me like, I cannot be doing this in 5 years, right? I just can't. And I was kind of looking at all these different things where my skill set, of course, would have been helpful because as academics we've got so many skills, but they weren't. It wasn't a source like I would have to learn a whole bunch of new stuff, and AI was one of them. I was looking into kind of going into AI, and then I was like, well, then I have to go back to college, and I just have this now. I wonder if you and maybe some listeners also now have a whole different perspective of of the academy, of the institution. I don't have much respect for it anymore, and I don't even want to go as a student. But then I said, you know what? You want to make this switch quick? Let's use the skills that you have, right? Which are many. And then I ran into you, and it shows you how to take those skills and just move them over a little bit. And I don't know if you even asked a question or what I'm responding to, but I felt like that information, like if you are an academic who really wants out and are afraid that you have to learn a whole new, a whole new discipline, you don't. Um, you can later down the line if you want, but and this can work for now, right? Um, or it can be a forever career.
That's great. Thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
reframing or rethinking about, the skills you already have and sort of applying them in a new context. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me. Tell everybody listening, if they would like to work with you, where can they find you?
My website is Ana Hartman Editing, and I can spell that A-N-A. There's only one A in Anna. Hartman editing.com. My email address is editor@anahartmanediting.com.
Great. So if you are a graduate student or faculty or an author who's, needs some guidance in polishing your manuscript and getting published, definitely reach out to Anna. As you can see, she's lovely and very kind and sharp and would love to work with you. So thanks again for being here, Anna.
Thank you so much for that, Paulina. And same with listeners who might want to get out of academia and become editors. Please check out Paulina's website, Becoming an Academic Editor.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.